Hey guys, welcome back. Jeb Smith, Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage here in Huntington Beach. And today we're going to talk about Huntington Beach's inclusionary housing program. So a lot of people refer to this as affordable housing. And while it is affordable housing, it's not, what you typically think of when you're thinking affordable housing. This is not Section 8 housing. This is nothing remotely close to Section 8 housing. This is housing that is restricted by the city. So when certain complexes were built, the city required so many of the units in that complex, in some cases the entire complex, to be part of this inclusionary program. And what the inclusionary program is it's a program set up by the city to more or less give affordable housing to residents of Huntington Beach based on gross income. So the city does certain calculations to figure out the income requirements, etc. But more or less, what it is it's housing that's set aside that where the prices are set by the city, and you have to qualify in order to buy these properties. So some things to keep in mind here. Now I know it can get pretty complex when talking about this sort of thing, so I'm just going to kind of outline some of the key pieces of it to help you understand what the inclusionary housing program is. First off, it's got to be an owner-occupied purchase, right? So you've got to live in the property. It cannot be an investment property at any point or time. So if you plan on buying one of these, you have to plan on living in the property. You can't later keep it and buy something else unless the inclusionary aspect of that property is gone. But as long as it's under the inclusionary housing program, it has to be owner occupied. Secondly is, and one of the more important pieces of this puzzle is you have to meet the income requirements set up by the city. And the income requirements change, but and they vary based on how many people live in the household. So if it's just one of you, the income is a certain amount, and if there's 5 of you, then the income requirements are higher. So the more people in the house, the higher the income threshold you can make, but you still have to be under that threshold in order to qualify for the program with the city. Another thing is the city sets the price of the property, right? So the homeowner doesn't have an option of saying, hey, I'm going to sell my property for X. The person selling the property that currently owns it has to submit paperwork to the city, and then the city comes back and says, hey, this is what you can sell the property for. And so the city mandates the price of the property. And now keep in mind, when you go to resell that property, again, the city sets the price of that property. So something to keep in mind there, because you are somewhat restricted on the amount of equity you can gain in that time frame. Now the properties will likely increase over time. I mean, they've gone up in value as properties have increased, but they're not going to increase at the level of a traditional single family residence or a traditional condo, just because the city has to keep them affordable based on their guidelines. So there is going to be a threshold and a cap on what they can appreciate up to. So that's something to keep in mind if you are buying one of those properties. Another thing is, anytime you go to refinance that property, get a second mortgage on that property, it has to be approved by the city. So there's certain paperwork that you have to submit to the city in order to do basic things that you would normally be able to do on a traditional property without having to get any approval. In this program, those steps have to be approved by the city. And then another thing to keep in mind is at some point in the future, depending on how each community was set up, the inclusionary actually falls off of the housing. So if you're in one of those properties, or you buy one of those properties that is set up under the inclusionary housing program, where there's income qualifications, you have to live in the property, etc., at some point in the future, now the city can mandate it up to 60 years to be part of the inclusionary program. It's up to 60, but a lot of the ones that were built, at least the ones I'm aware of, aren't in that time frame. In fact, there's one I think that was built around 99, and the inclusionary is up in about 10 years. So you do the math on that. What's that? That's about a 40-year time frame that they mandated on that. And when that time frame is up, those properties, I'm sorry, 30 years. No, 40 years. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here in my head doing the math and talking. But essentially what I'm getting at is that when that inclusionary falls off of that housing, then the people that own those properties can sell them for whatever they want to. So they no longer have to get approval from the city. They can actually go out and say, hey, I want to sell my property for X. But also keep in mind that there's a lot of people waiting for that time frame. So when that time frame does come, there's probably going to be a huge influx of those properties coming to the market, because there's people that are holding on to them just to get to that threshold where they can sell them for market value, if you will, and not the city mandated price. So those are the basics of the program. Clearly there's a lot things, additional questions that could be asked, and I'm here if you do have those, so feel free to reach out to me directly. You can comment below, I'll address them there as well. But the housing program, a lot of people say, well, should I do it? Well, here's the thing. In the city of Huntington Beach, these properties are set at a price that is affordable, right? That's the idea. And for that price, essentially you can't buy anything else in the area. So if you want to live in the area of Huntington Beach and you qualify for that program, it's a good deal, because a comparable property in the area that's not under the affordable housing or under the inclusionary program is going to be quite a bit higher in price. So if you took the same price at which you're able to buy one of those properties under the inclusionary program to another city or what have you, you're going to get a lot less for your money than you are in this particular program. And a lot of them are close to the beach and in really good areas and newer construction. So you're getting a lot more property for a lesser amount of money, which is the idea. But there are restrictions on it, right? So you just have to be okay with those restrictions. You have to understand those restrictions. And the biggest thing is you got to be able to qualify for them, right? So when one of these hits the market, there's a huge influx of people that are interested because they don't understand it. They don't know that it's under the inclusionary program. And then a lot of people, when they go through the process of trying to get approved, which is part of the deal, right? So I mentioned initially that you have to have income requirements and meet certain guidelines. That means, it's a lot like qualifying for a mortgage initially, right? So when you qualify for your mortgage, there's paperwork involved, there's applications you have to fill out, you have to provide income, tax returns, pay stubs, assets, that sort of thing. It's the same thing with the city. The only thing is your income, your total assets, aren't necessarily an issue. I mean, you can have a lot of money, but based on your income is how you qualify, right? So they're only really looking at your income and to make sure that you have the money for the down payment. They're not looking at your total net worth, is what I was getting at. They're just looking at income, but there is an application with the city. There is documentation that's required in order for you to see if you qualify, right? And so a lot of people, when they get through that process, don't qualify for one reason or the other because, they're looking at a debt to income ratio just like a lender is. You can't make, you can't use 100% of your income in order to buy the property. I think that they want somewhere around a 35% of your total income going towards the mortgage, the taxes, utilities. They look at that whole picture. So it is somewhat difficult to qualify, but it's a great deal if you can get in there, just because you're going to get a better property than you would otherwise for that amount of money. So I hope that's helpful. I hope I explained it in terms that you can understand. It's a lot easier to talk and go back and forth when there's questions involved and just addressing questions. So talking to a camera is a little bit more difficult, but if you do have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to answer those. I also put a link below that takes you directly to the city, so you can see the income requirements. You can see what is qualified or what is required to qualify with the city. So if you have additional questions about it, click the link below. Contact me directly. I'm happy to help. I have several clients that live in these properties, so I know them well, and I can help guide you through that process if you're interested. So give me a shout if you need anything. As always, I do appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.